Hello guys, once again welcome to our YouTube channel Edu Hub, and our new course is Python programming for beginners. So as you know how much important is Python programming language is for today's world, and as you know how much demand we have for this course, so without wasting time let's get started. Phython for Beginners Part 1.
Hi guys, so for this Python for Beginners course, I intend to cover a variety of different topics within Python, specifically the basics. So I'm going to go over the different data types in Python. I'm going to go over the difference between strings, numbers, and also Boolean values. I'm also going to cover conditional statements such as the if-else statements. I'm going to go over lists in Python, using dictionaries, and also using variables. Hi guys, so before we begin, you're going to need to download Python. So here we're going to be downloading the latest version of Python, which is Python 3.9.4. So I've already downloaded Python on my PC, so if you haven't already done that, quickly download it and then head over to your text editor. In my case, I'm using Atom for my text editor. And then what you need to do is open a folder using Atom and then create a file called myprogram.py. It doesn't need to be that, but you can just copy what I did. And then once you've made that file, you're going to need to open up the terminal. And then, as you can see, we're already in my folder, which is Python course up here. So what we want to do now is we want to test and see that everything is working, and we can see data that we print in our console or in our terminal. So we're going to type in the name of our tab, which is myprogram.py. But first of all, we need to type in Python 3.9, since that's the version of Python that we're using. And then space, and then the name of the tab, which is myprogram.py. And then when we press enter, we should see working. So we've successfully printed the string working into our terminal, which is a sign that everything is working as it should be. So once you get this step working, then we should be all set up to move forward. So now that everything is working and we can see our data that we print in our code within our terminal, we're now going to talk about numbers. So in Python we have a variety of data types. We have, for example, we have numbers, we have strings, and we have Boolean values. However, numbers are one of the most important data types in Python because you're most likely going to be using them a lot of the time. So I'm just going to give you an example of different ways we can handle numbers, which are quite straightforward. So we can simply print a number, let's say 7, into our terminal. Let me just get this line. So Python 3.9 myprogram.py. And we have the number 7. Python also allows us to carry out various calculations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So many different mathematical operations can be done within Python. So we can add these two numbers together, which will give us 14. We can do subtraction, 7 minus 5, which would give us 2. We could do multiplication, which would be like this. That will give us 35, 7 times 5. You can also do division, so let's say, divided by 4. That would give us 40 divided by 4. And that will give us 10. So we can do subtraction, addition with Python, multiplication, and division. We can also use variables and put our numbers in those variables. So we can put my num equals 5. Equals 8. And then we can print and this should give us the number 13. And there we have it. So this is an example of how numbers can be used in Python. We can do even more complex mathematics with Python, but in this example you can clearly see how numbers can, be added or subtracted from each other. And yeah, like I said, numbers are a very important data type in Python. So understanding how they work is really important when it comes to, manipulating data and also carrying out various mathematical operations. Another interesting thing we can do with Python in regard to numbers is to determine the order of mathematical operations. So what I mean by this is, for example, let's quickly do a quick mathematical, let's say 3 multiplied by 2 plus 2, and that gives us 8. So 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2, 8. So in this case, Python is simply doing 3 multiplied by 2, and then that result is adding 2 to that result. So 3 times 2, 6 plus 2. However, we have a level of control over the order of operation because we can add parentheses to 2 plus 2. So once we do that, this lets Python know that we're putting emphasis on this. So it starts with the operation here, and then whatever is outside of the parentheses is used as normal. So this would be 4, and then Python would read this as 3 multiplied by the sum or whatever is within the result of whatever is within the parentheses. So in this case, if we run this code, we get 12 instead of 8, simply because Python is reading this as a priority. So this gives us the result of 4. So we get 3 multiplied by 4, which is 12. So this is one way that we can take control over how Python handles numbers. So in this case, we use parentheses and simply put the bracket around the areas where we want there to be a priority so that we can control the order of operation. So in Python, strings are probably one of the most important types of data simply because of how often they are used. So for this section, I'm just going to cover how to use strings in Python. So I'm just going to give another quick example. So we're going to have a string that says let's go to the movies. Then if we enter, we get our string printed out, let's go to the movies. So a string is simply a piece of text that we can access in our code and print to our terminal and use for a wide range of purposes. So in this case, we can see that strings must always be wrapped around these double quotes so that Python knows that whatever we have inside of these quotes is indeed a string. Another interesting thing we could do is we can make line breaks within our string so that we have parts of our string that render on the next line. So to do that, we're going to use the \n and we'll see what happens. So as we can see, our \n has made the elements, the string, the part of the string after it to render on the second line. So let's go to the movies, which is on the second line. Another thing we can do with Python, as we can see, we have a string that needs to be wrapped in double quotes, but there might be an instance where we want to have words in our string to have quotes, and we can't simply wrap quotes around because Python would get confused at this. For example, if we did, let's go to the movies and press enter, we get an error because Python thinks that we've ended our string here, when in fact what we wanted is to have our string and then the word the to have double quotes. So the way around this is to use the / again. So the / simply tells Python that we're not ending the string here, but we simply want to use or insert these double quotes within the string. So we need to use them before the first quote and also before the second quote. That way Python will understand what we're trying to do. So if we render again, and we can see our string and the word the has double quotes. So this really allows us to, this / really allows us to do a lot of useful things with Python. We can also use variables in Python. So let's get rid of these. So we can create a variable called my word, or let's say my destination equals, in our case, movies. So we're going to just add movies, and then we're going to delete movies from there. And then we can simply use our variable and then we should get a similar result. Okay, we need a space, so we can add double quotes with the space. And then we should get a similar result. Let's go to the movies. And then we can easily change this to wherever we want. And that should reflect in the data in our terminal. So this is just an example of a few interesting things you can do with strings. With Python, we can use functions, we can determine how to add double quotes to our string using the backslash. We've seen that we can have our string, parts of our string render on the second line. And yeah, there's so many things we can do with strings with Python, but the most important thing is to know that strings are probably one of the most used types of data in Python. So really practicing and understanding how the whole process works and experimenting should really help you with your understanding of how to use and manipulate strings. So when it comes to strings, we can also use functions in Python to manipulate each individual string. So in this case, let's use our variable, my destination, which contains the string hotel. And then what we want to do is set every alphabet to capital letters or to uppercase. So we're gonna put our variable, then we're gonna use the upper function, and then we're gonna see what happens to our string. So hotel is now in capital letters, simply because we've used the function, the upper, to set each letter within the string to a capital. If we use the lower function, we should have everything changed to a lowercase. So we can see the capital H has now been set to a lower case h. So in Python, we also have the ability to manipulate strings using functions. A function is simply a block of code that performs a specific function. So in this case, our functions are manipulating whether our letters are in capital letters or in lowercase. So for this section, we're going to cover what we call string concatenation. So in Python, we have the ability to join multiple strings together into one string. And I'm going to quickly give an example of how to do that. So in Python, we can very easily print out a string to our console or to our terminal. I would like to go for a walk, and then our string shows up in our terminal. However, we can also add individual words or strings within our string. So we could put a variable called where, and just take the variable and then add it. So this is the process of concatenation, where we add another string to an existing string, and that will print out as one string when we print this to the console. So we should get a string that says, I would like to go for a walk in the park. So this is one string, but we've clearly added an additional string to our existing string. Another example we can do is with names. So we can have a name, or we can have a first name that equals page, and we can add a surname. Turner. And then we can simply concatenate these two variables and print them out as one string or as one full name. So we can put the surname. We also need to add a space in between. So let me show you what happens when we print it out like this, and then the best way to do it afterwards. So here we get the name, but we want there to be a gap or space between the first name and the surname. So what we do is we add another space, which is another individual string, which has a value of space, and then we concatenate the surname after that, and we should get a first name, space, and a surname. And there we have it. We have our full name and we have our space in between. You can just put full name equals this, or better yet, this. Then we can print out this variable, full name. And that again gives us our full name with the space in between. So this is a simple example of what concatenation looks like using Python. So for this section, I would like to quickly cover another data type, which is lists. And in Python, we have the ability to make lists which can hold more than one data type. So in this case, we're going to have a string. We can also have a Boolean value in our list. We can also have numbers as well. So this right here is a variable, is a list that has been assigned to a variable, and our list has 3 different data types in it. But for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to use strings, a list of 3 strings. And I'm going to quickly print this so that we can see it in our terminal. So that. And we can see our list in our terminal. So what if we wanted to grab the first item in our list? Well, in Python, our items each have a specific index, and this index starts from 0 upwards. So bread would have an index of 0, and eggs will have an index of 1, for example. So if you wanted to grab bread, our first item, we could type out the variable and then the square braces put 0, and then this should grab the first element in our list. So we could put this within here, and that should give us the first element, which is bread. If we wanted to grab the last element, we would simply put -1, and that gives us the last element in our list. And if we wanted to get everything from a specific element and onwards, we would just put, so let's say eggs, which is the first element, we would put 1 with a colon. And then that would give us every, so if I added more, items to our list, just to make it easier, we would see everything from our first index onwards. And another thing we can do is we can select a range. So if we wanted to print eggs, milk, and biscuits, which is the first index to the third index, we would simply grab those indexes. So index 1 colon index 4 should give us the first index to the third index. So the thing with Python is we need to specify the index after the last item that we want to print. So in this case, we're going to see index 1, index 2, index 3, even though we've put index 4. if we put index 3, then we're only going to see index 1 and 2 and not 3. So that can be a bit tricky, but it's a bit straightforward once you understand to add that additional index. So in this case, we have index 1, 2, and 3, but we're only going to see index 1 and 2. So let's try that again, and we have index 1 and index 2. So with lists in Python, there's another interesting thing that we can do, and that is to change items within our lists into different values. So we can change the values of each item. And before we do that, I'm just going to quickly test that everything works. So and that works just fine. So now I want to change eggs, which is index number 1, into chocolates. So to do that, we would need to select our variable square braces index number 1, which is eggs, now equals chocolate. So if we were to now select, so I'll just do it here, our variable at the index number 1, we should, let's give this capital uppercase C, we should see chocolate. So index number 1 has now successfully been changed into chocolate. Another thing we can do is print out the entire list and see how that looks. So let's do that again. And now we can see that our list that once had eggs at the first index now has been replaced with chocolate.